Okay, so one of the main processes of the spinal cord is to move information from your brain down to your body and then from your body back up to your brain. And so these are called tracts. We have sensory and motor tracts. These sensory and motor tracts they work in opposites. So our sensory or ascending tracts are going to conduct nerve impulses from our body up toward our brain. And the motor tracts are going to be moving information from our brain down to our body. So they are one-way streets, all right? So a sensory tract only moves things towards the brain. Motor tracts only move things toward the body. They are one-way streets. And so I've got a handout, 13B, that's going to talk a little bit about these in more detail. Now, here's what's really cool and kind of crazy, is that our spinal cord is not just one big cord. It's actually made up of a bunch of small cords all bundled together. So if you look at our picture here, I have this color coded so that red always represents motor tracts and blue represents sensory tracts. So if you look at this, there are specific parts of the spinal cord that are going to be motor tracts, moving information from our brain to our body. And then there are specific places on the spinal cord that are sensory tracts that move things from our body to our brain. Now, each of these tracts are very specific to a function. So I have this listed here, and you're going to have to know the general function of these tracts. On the test, I won't ask you to point out where they are in the spinal cord. So actually, this picture is not as important as just knowing what the function of these tracts are. So I'm not going to have a diagram that shows you this picture here on the test where you are going to be labeling where these tracts are. But let's talk first about sensory tracts. So I've got a set of sensory tracts that are moving information from our body to our brain. So for example, we have this spinothalamic tract. Now, just to show you, if I go up on the diagram, see, I can find these spinothalamic tracts. We have several of them. We have a lateral spinothalamic tract, which is right here. We have an anterior spinothalamic tract, which is in the front part of your spinal cord. So we have specific areas where these are located, and they have specific functions. So the spinothalamic tract is going to move information to our brain regarding pain, regarding temperature, and light touch, like something is lightly touching you. Imagine a bug is crawling on your skin and you feel it. That would be light touch. So this information, these nerve impulses are going to move through the spinothalamic tract if we are experiencing pain, temperature changes, and light touch. Now let's compare that to a different tract called the spinocerebellar tract. Now, if I move down here, see, spinocerebellar tracts are going to be on the side here. So we've got a tract here on the side that's a spinocerebellar tract. All right. There's another one, the posterior spinocerebellar. So you get the idea. They're in a different location than our spinothalamic tracts. They have a different function. So the spinocerebellar tract is going to be proprioception. So it's constantly sending information up to our brain about proprioception. That's sort of like the condition of our body. What position is our body in? Where are our body parts in relation to other body parts? That's proprioception. So that information is being sent through the spinocerebellar. Now let's look at this. We have another one called the vestibulocerebellar, and that's going to be sending information to our brain about our posture, our balance, and equilibrium. So you can hopefully begin to see that this is a nifty way to avoid traffic jams, right? So if I'm sending information about pain and temperature through a different tract as my body awareness and my posture and balance, these bits of information can't get log jammed as we're trying to send them up to the brain because they're all going on a different pathway. If our highways were built this way, it'd be great, right? I mean, could you imagine like a highway to Denver that only allows trucks to drive on, and then a highway for only cars, and then maybe there'd be a highway just for skiers? And so we wouldn't have the traffic jams on I-70 that we have if we had 3 different highways. Well, our spinal cord is sort of working the same way. We've got these different pathways for different information. All right, then we have the spinocerebellar. This is going to send information about muscle tone and the movements of our limbs, our arms and legs. So as our arms and legs move, we're going to send signals to our brain so that our brain knows where our arms and legs are located. This is why you can multitask so well. Driving is a great example of this because you're sending information to your brain at such a fast rate of speed that a lot of times your brain knows what your feet and arms are doing, and you're not even really thinking about it too much. The final one for sensory is the posterior columns. These are going to be, it says proprioception, so body awareness, discriminative touch, and then pressure and vibration. So discriminative touch is being able to tell one thing from another by touching it. So like if you're grabbing an apple versus an orange, you can tell what that is through discriminative touch. Then of course we have pressure and vibration. So if you have your phone on vibrate in your pocket and it vibrates, you pick that up, that's sent through these posterior columns. Now there is actually a handy way of determining that these are all sensory tracts, with the exception of the posterior columns. If you look at the words spinothalamic, spinocerebellar, vestibulocerebellar, spinocerebellar, they tell you that it's sensory by the name. It's going to be, the first part of the name is going to be the body, spine. And the second part of the name is going to be the brain. So we're going from the body to the brain, body to the brain, body to the brain, body to the brain. The exception is the posterior column. So I guess you're just going to have to memorize that is a sensory. But if you look at this and you go spinocerebellar, spine to cerebellum. Spine is part of our body. Cerebellum's part of the brain. It's a sensory because it's going from the body to the brain. Pretty cool little trick there. Now, let's look at some of these motor tracts. So the motor tracts, we have the corticospinal. And notice, before I even talk about function, you can tell through most of these that it goes from brain to body. See, cortico, like the cortex of your brain, to the spine, spinal. Corticospinal. So it's brain to body. The corticospinal is going to be sending motor skills, so information to work our muscles, for precise, skilled, voluntary muscular movements. So all of those functions where you're moving your body, those are going through the corticospinal tracts. And so, I mean, that's a pretty important function. Now, just to show you where they are at here, is the corticospinal tracts. You can see them right here. Here's another corticospinal tract. These are sending precise, skilled movements to your body. Then we have the tectospinal tract. It's going to be sending information down for sight and auditory stimuli. So like if you need to move your head, you hear a sound, that's sensory, and then that information is relayed back to your muscles to move your head to the side or to look at something that you need to respond to. That's going to be through the tectospinal tracts. Then we have the rubrospinal. It's going to be sending information about muscle tone. So that, this is involuntary, and it may be a slower need or a need that's not as important as, let's say, a precise, skilled voluntary move. So your rubrospinal is going to be controlling muscle control. Then our vestibulospinal is going to be working on posture and muscle tone, equilibrium, balance, coordination. So it's sending information to your body to maintain good posture and good muscle tone. And then our reticulospinal, that is a tract that's going to be sending information to our heart for blood pressure, heart rate, and then our respiratory rates. So when you start running, your corticospinal tract is going to be sending information to your skeletal muscle to make you run, but then your reticulospinal is going to be sending different information to your heart and your blood vessels and your lungs to get them working as well. So again, we don't have that traffic jam that can be an issue. So each of these have a different function that's specific to a need that our body has. Now remember, you need to know the name and the function and not the location. All right, so I'm trying to make it a little bit easier for you by not having you memorize where those are located. I just thought I'd give you some examples. So when you think about the spinal cord, don't think about the spinal cord as just one wire. All right? It's not just one wire. It's actually a bundle of wires. Some information's moving one way, some information's moving the other way, but they're one-way streets. All right? So if I have a motor tract, it might be right next to a sensory tract. This is like 4th Street. This is like 5th Street. They are one-way streets, and the information cannot go the opposite direction. And remember, this is how our neurons are built, right? So our spinal cord has these different tracts for different functions. Some are motor, some are sensory. All right, next we're going to talk about the second thing that our spinal cord does, and that's going to be reflexes. And I've got several handouts that talk about the different reflexes of our spinal cord.